This is the beginning of the topicality lecture. I say it's apparently my favorite thing because I go for it a lot. Topicality is massively strategically useful for a lot of reasons, not just when you're going for it, which is why it is valuable to learn about, which is why we're learning about it today. My first question is, why is T a reason to vote neg?
Because the app should, or you shouldn't be debating something that's not topical with
Why not?
the resolution. Because the neg doesn't get any grounds to debate it.
There's plenty of ground.
Well, could.
If I read an F from last year's topic, there's plenty of ground from last year's topic, is there not?
Well, yeah, but that's not what we're debating.
It's not what we're debating. So what?
So it's unfair.
Did someone just join? Nope, nobody just joined. It just made a noise at me because I presented. So yeah, why is T a voter? Well, fundamentally, this boils down to a question of burdens of proof. What's the affirmative's burden in a debate round?
I could answer. You should try answering some. I
So
have a
the
good
bigger
guess.
the F or wait, sorry.
The affirmatives, yes.
Affirmatives burden. They have to win all the stock issues.
Forget about stock issues forever and always. Their burden is to prove the resolution, right? Is that what you were going to say?
I was going to say to present a topical plan.
Okay, well, a topical plan is a way of proving the resolution, right?
Yeah.
And if they are not topical, are they proving the resolution? No. All right. That's the big reason why topicality exists. That's not really how we end up debating it. This is a T-shell. Has 4 parts. What are the parts to a T-shell?
I know this.
Do you know that? Have you been told?
Links, impacts. Or no, is that it?
That's parts of a disad.
Yeah, this is a T-shell, so this is a little bit.
But they are kind of the same. An interpretation is, in a sense, a uniqueness counterplan. A violation is a link. Standards are internal links and voters are impacts. But we're not going to think about them in that sense for now. We're just going to talk about a T-shell as having these 4 parts. So if I could get the next slide, thank you. An interpretation is a definition of a word in the resolution.
Could it be also like a, not just specifically a word, but like a
Phrase?
Phrase?
Yes.
Like that. Okay.
Okay, good interp evidence. What are some things that might make good interp evidence?
I don't know.
You got any thoughts, Ty?
I do. So if it's like a dictionary or something that like
A reputable source, sure.
Source, yeah.
Okay. So intent to define. Is that your phone? What is that? That keeps spooking me. If you could put that on silent, that would be nice. Sorry. It's just like I get jump scared every time because I think somebody's joined the Google Meet. All right. So good interp evidence has intent to define. That means that it's not just describing something in some context. It is attempting to define the word. This interp evidence is mediocre. It's got some amount of intent to define. It's reasonably predictable, and it does have intent to exclude, which is the next one. Because here it says the SSA oversees all programs related to Social Security. So any program that isn't overseen by the SSA is then not related to Social Security. So that is some exclusion that it's doing. But again, this is not really a great card. Contextual relevance. If it's defining a term of art or a term that takes on different meanings in different contexts, your definition ought to be from the context that you are debating about. Otherwise, it's unpredictable. Predictability. Well, I'm really good at telling the future here. Predictability means that your interpretation isn't just out of left field. Like an affirmative team could see it coming and could understand that this would be something you could expect as a definition of the word in the resolution. And credibility. So these should be, the more credible your evidence, the better. That's just a general rule.
Can I ask a question about the answer real quick?
Yes.
For if you, wait, are you going to go over how to respond to one later in this lecture, or is that
Yes.
okay? Cool.
This is more thorough than it should be, and not as I'd want it to be. A violation. What's a violation, Ty?
It's a violation that the app does, or something that they like not do, I guess.
With respect to what?
Definitions or
With respect to definitions, aka the interp.
Yeah.
The F doesn't meet the interp. Sometimes this violation doesn't require evidence, sometimes it does. This is an example of an affirmative from last year's topic about an expansion of TANF, the Temporary Assistance for Needy Families program. The AF expanded it. We argued that it is not under the Social Security Administration because it's not administered by the Social Security Administration, so it's not Social Security. This violation did require evidence because we had to prove that TANF is not under the Social Security Administration. This one actually took two cards. We had to say that TANF is under HHS and that Health and Human Services is separate from the Social Security Administration. So this is your violation. They don't meet the interpretation, so they're doing something wrong. Standards are a way to judge interpretations. This is how we differentiate between them and decide whether an interp is the one that the debate community ought to be operating under. There's one good standard, and all the others kind of revolve around it. Limits is kind of at the core of all of topicality, and we'll talk about why in a little bit. There are a bunch of others that are secretly derived from limits. These are grounds, topic education, framers intent, a bunch of others. This SACD is me using like tier list rankings here. Limits is the best standard. Grounds is okay. Topic education is mediocre, and framers intent is oftentimes complete BS. Standards continued. Limits. Limits define what is and is not topical. Limits is the list of things that are topical compared with the list of things that are not. What is debate like without limits? Dan, you can feel free to answer this.
If it define but it is not, then a debate without limits would mean that the app could argue anything, and then it goes back to find something to say.
What's that world like for the neg?
Really hard.
It's very difficult. If you as a 2N are told that you have to prep out every conceivable policy proposal, you no longer have a life. And you have millions and millions of things you have to do. Neg prep is based off of limits. Our ability to prepare to have a discussion, so grounds, revolves around the idea that we have a limited topic and we know what we might expect coming into a debate round. Limits should be predictable. How do we achieve this? I'll give you an example of an unpredictable. If I were to say that topical AFs on the IPR topic are ones that protect water resources, and untopical AFs are ones that expand patent protections, could you predict that upon reading the resolution? No, that is the opposite of predictable. That is just, I mean, I just swapped topics there. So, what might make a limit predictable?
It's topicality. How close it is to the original resolution.
Yeah, so obviously with the example that I just gave, your limits should have anything to do with the topic, but more specifically, when we get into debates about particular meanings of words in the resolution, what makes our interpretation predictable, and thus the limits that it creates predictable.
Maybe operating in the same fields, like their plan operates in the same fields as IP, like say.
So the definition is from the context that it operates in.
Yes.
So like somebody researching the topic would encounter definitions like this, right? Okay, so that's one way. It should be context specific. Another way is just that it's a good definition. Like it'll be predictable if you get it from Oxford Law. It won't be predictable if you get it from some random blog that nobody's ever going to look at. Bright lines. It ought to be clear what is and what is not topical. This is important because you don't want your interpretation leaving room for us to debate about whether something is topical or not. Instead of just under that interpretation, it should be clear. It should distinguish between topical and non-topical AFs so that we don't have to do all the nitty-gritty work of debating whether something meets an interpretation. Limits, you want to be, so there's a balance that must be struck, right? If you have too big of limits, what happens?
The limits define what is and is not topical. So if the limits are too large, they allow too many.
Yes.
If they allow
So what does that result in?
a really abstract debate.
Yeah, it results in an AF skew, and it makes it really hard to be neg. And we don't have the kinds of discussions that we would have if we prepared out a smaller number of affirmatives in more depth. How about you, Ty? What happens if we are over limiting, if the limits are too small?
Then it would be too easy for the neg, and the AF is not.
Is it
It's
too
not
easy
very
for the
good.
neg?
It would be.
Well, AF
really
gets
hard
to
for the
prep
AF.
themselves out too, right?
Yeah, it would be really hard for the AF though, because like they would have to be following a very specific set of the neg.
I actually disagree with you here. I think that AFs and negs, if they have a lot, AF has infinite prep for their own AF. So no matter what amount of prep the neg does, the AF should always be prepared to debate them because they picked their AF. But what I will say, so I don't think that underlimiting causes a structural neg skew. And a good evidence of this is that LD only has one AF for a resolution that lasts 1 or 2 months. And they're fine. There's no, well, LD is neg skewed, but that's because of its speech times. But still, there isn't this issue where the more you research a topic, the more neg is winning. So what the real issue here is that if our topic is too small, we're missing out on educational opportunities to learn about more things. And we end up in stale, repetitive debates. We're debating the same things all year. Case lists. These are a way to articulate limits. You give lists of things that are allowed under your interpretation and things that aren't. This will also come up in counter-interpreting. This just helps clarify like why your limits are good. Like you should be like, we include all these good affirmatives, so there's plenty of good ground and topic education to be had, which again, ground and topic education are other standards, but they're really all just about limits. And we exclude the sorts of apps that are not fun to debate about, that are really nitpicky and small, or that dodge the core topic controversies, stuff like that. Grounds. Again, the concept that we have grounds like core topic generics and arguments for both sides relies on there being a limited topic, because there's obviously grounds always. Any policy proposal that hasn't been done yet, you at least have the politics dissad. You almost always have a counterplan of some sort. So there's usually a good argument to be made. But the issue is if you don't have limits that are well adjusted, it doesn't matter where grounds are. Because there's anything is debatable, but that doesn't mean that everything is debatable at the same time. I can't be ready to debate anything. So there should be good arguments on both sides, but we only achieve this if we have a set of arguments that we expect, like we expect should be reasonably included. So apps shouldn't delink core disads, otherwise we're dodging topic controversies. Or should they? Maybe they should. Maybe it's valuable to get neg debaters on their toes and off their feet. This is an internal link to fairness because negative debaters should have something to say. It's an internal link to education because negative debaters, when they say something, it is because they researched that something and they are learning about that something. Standard topic education, I actually go for this a fair amount, but specifically in other theory debates about things like process counterplans. But does an interpretation facilitate debates that center around core topic controversies and that are educational about the topic? Hence, topic education. This is an internal link to education, obviously. I don't think I have anything more on this one. Framers' intent is kind of stupid. It's what did the topic writers envision for the topic? This is sort of an internal link to predictability, because if the framers wrote the topic paper that the NSDA publishes, everyone can go see it. They can go see what kind of limits the framers were thinking of. And that makes those limits inherently somewhat predictable because they are in the NSDA's topic paper. This is also sort of a bad argument. It's not great. Unless you think that the NSDA topic writing committee has a beautiful track record of writing balanced, educational, and interesting topics, which they don't. NATO. Then this doesn't really hold any sway. Voters. Reasons why T is a voting issue or reasons why your standards matter. These are fairness. There's two types of fairness. There's structural fairness, also known as competitive equity, and procedural fairness. Structural fairness relates to the opportunities and access that people have to compete in debate and their opportunities for success, and how those differ between different groups. So maybe big schools have a structural advantage over smaller schools, or maybe wealthier people have a structural advantage over people with lower incomes. These are things that T is not in debates with plan texts and topical affirmatives, or at least attempting to be topical affirmatives. Structural fairness is not as big of an impact. But still, if you are going to go for this, it's going to be in sort of the limit sense that big schools may be more prepared to prep out 150 apps, whereas small schools may have a better time and be less structurally disadvantaged on a topic with 10. Procedural fairness is more directly related to topicality. It is how the way that we set up our debate rounds produces a more fair debate. So, for example, if there were two speeches in policy, a 1AC and a 1NC, and the 1AC were 10 minutes and the 1NC were 2, that is a procedurally unfair way of doing debate because the way that we've set up has such a structural AF bias. So limits also, as you pointed out earlier, if an interpretation is under limiting, that is not only a structural AF bias, not only does that reproduce structural inequities, it's also a procedural AF bias, since the way that we're doing debate, not just the way that debate interacts with society writ large, favors the AF, since they have so many more options and neg debaters have so many more things they have to prep out. So fairness is essentially a question of, does this interpretation allow for rounds where both sides have a fair shot? Is one side's workload excessive? Can each side be prepared for the other? These are the sorts of questions that get at fairness concerns. The other big voter is education, which is the reason that we do debate. Does this interpretation create an educational environment? How do we get education from debate?
You learn how to speak.
You do?
And go to different events around the world.
Yeah, and also when you're researching, you're learning about the world. So by facilitating research and preparation, we're promoting education. But is there room to engage in educational debate? And can teams research and prepare for that debate? We don't think about this quite as much in T with plans debates because it's almost a priori assumed that if an app is blatantly untopical, that ought to be voted against. Whereas in T against planless affirmatives, so KAFs, which we'll talk about more, we might have to argue whether fairness or education comes first. Well, that still does come up in this kind of debate. But we also might have to argue whether education is good in the first place, or the education that a topical affirmative produces is good in the first place. And we'll talk more about impact turning voters. For now, we're going to assume that fairness and education are good. You might debate about which is more important. Fairness, sometimes we'll say, comes first, because if debate is structural or procedurally unfair and everyone goes 3-3, nobody's going to do it. But you might say education comes first because it's all that we really get out of debate, and fairness is not an impact. That's a big debate to be had. All right. Additional funny T things. There's extra topicality, which is when the plan includes action that is untopical in addition to topical action. The United States federal government should protect patents and improve infrastructure. This kind of just boils down to topicality. Like, if we allow them to do untopical things, that's bad. Allowing extra T explodes limits. They can skirt neg ground by adding on additional planks that aren't topical. They can add additional advantages that neg debaters aren't prepared for based on untopical planks. So extra topicality is bad. But you can argue that it isn't. Affects topicality. The plan is not topical. The action that it carries out is not topical, but it results in topical effects. Example, it was hard to come up with one for this topic, but I said the United States federal government should ban lobbying against intellectual property rights. This would result, at least probably would result, in a significant strengthening of intellectual property rights. But this comes not as a direct result of the plan, but it has this intermediate step where lobbyists stop lobbying, other lobbyists continue lobbying, so those pro-IPR lobbyists get their way, and then we have a strengthening in protections. This is sometimes a blurred line between effects topicality and actual topicality, but probably not on this topic. Effects topicality is bad because, again, it's a limits question. Neg debaters are prepared to debate topical plans, not topical effects of untopical plans. So that it limits, always limits. The 2AC to topicality has 4 big components to answer the 4 big components of the 1NC shell. You're going to have a we meet, which answers the violation, a counter interp, which answers their interp, standards, which answer their standards, but also are standards for your counter interp, and reasonability, which is an answer to the idea that topicality is a voting issue. First is the we meet. The violation is wrong. You're going to say that we meet their interpretation. Sometimes this means that they're misunderstanding their interpretation and that it actually doesn't exclude the F. So if it doesn't have intent to exclude, it might say that a word means something, but it doesn't say that it doesn't also mean something else. And that something else would be your F. They're misunderstanding our F. It does fall under their interp. They just don't really understand how, and you're going to explain how. Or this weird argument called plan text in a vacuum, which is that if they win that some word in the resolution or in our plan text means this thing, then because that word is in our plan text, then that is what we advocated for. So if significantly means 50%, then we, by definition, are advocating for 50% because that's what significantly means. So if they win that, then that's what we were advocating for all along. So this means you're ignoring solvency advocates or other descriptions of what your affirmative does, and you are defaulting to what the definitions of the words in your plan text mean. This is a bad argument, but people go for it. Sometimes we meets are BS time skews because you want another argument that'll take them a little bit to explain why we're wrong about, and it'll take you very little time to say. So if you don't, even if you actually violate, like obviously actually violate, oftentimes it's still beneficial to put a we meet in there because they have to answer it. The counterinterp. This redefines the words that the negative says you violate in a way that you meet. Good counterinterp evidence is often good for the same reasons that interp evidence is good. It has intent to define, intent to exclude, clear bright lines, credibility, and predictability. A little note about this. There's kind of two strategies that you can go for with the counterinterp. You can either be like, the interp is bad, so we're gonna make a very different counterinterp. We think that they've just done this all totally wrong. Or a counterinterp that's only a little different and includes your AF, but doesn't include much else. So that results in kind of a different way that you end up doing the standards debate. So this is the 2AC standards page, something it might look like. So this is answering why your counterinterp is better than the negative's interp. So limits, you'll say that the neg definition is over-limiting. Almost always you will say it's over-limiting. Sometimes it's both over-limiting and under-limiting. But because it is over-limiting, because it excludes your AF, you are expanding at least one part of its limits if you want to include your AF. So they will almost always be over-limiting. So you're going to say that the neg's definition excludes good AFs that we should be debating about. You might say the neg's definition is arbitrary. There's a number of reasons this could be. It's unpredictable, and maybe the interp isn't in context. So you're going to end up with this weird definition. Maybe it lacks intent to define or exclude. So they're just putting that intent to define, exclude in there after the fact, which is arbitrary. Maybe it's excessively niche. Their definition comes from a context that's too specific, so it's excluding stuff. And then another argument that's kind of on standards, kind of on reasonability, is functional limits. This is the argument that there are arguments that check the worst offenders of the interp. So if, let's say, maybe the state's counterplan solves a lot of AFs that violate the neg's interp and solves them really well. So that's a functional limit, which means that we don't really need to worry about this T debate because the worst impacts that the neg can present are solved by these functional limits. They're topic generics arguments. Or maybe the worst offenders just don't exist because there isn't evidence out there to support them. So let's say somebody says significantly strengthen must mean like a bigger change than your change is. You would say that nobody's arguing for tiny little nitpicky changes because there just isn't the evidence out there to support those, which is probably not true on this topic. But anyway, this argument is also called lit checks. The second aspect of the functional limits argument is that the existence of literature and research about a particular AF proves that it is both somewhat valid and debatable, and that it's not the worst offender under their interp. All right, reasonability. This is a big one. So reasonability is a reason why T is not really a voting issue. So if the app is essentially arguing that you ought to be lenient to the affirmative on T, that, quote, good is good enough is a phrase you'll see a lot in these debates. And it's arguing that the app's defense is sufficient and that you should have a very high bar for voting on topicality. so that the AF defense is sufficient, even if the counter interp is maybe a little bit worse than the interpretation. And we'll get to why. So you're going to vote, you're going to say that you're not voting on T if the AF is reasonably topical. There's a number of ways you could become reasonably topical. Maybe you're like topical-ish under the negs interp, or maybe you're topical under a reasonably good counter interp, or maybe you're just quite close to the negs interp. It also raises this question of whether the AF is debatable in this round, this AF in this round, rather than the other AFs that the counter interp might allow for. So this raises this question of actual versus potential abuse. So reasonability is saying that the impacts of T must be the ones that arise in this actual round, not ones that could arise from other AFs that might be allowed. So actual abuse must happen for you to vote on T, not just potential abuse. Why might reasonability be good?
It allows for the AF to win by a broad range, so like if it's reasonably topical, so you don't need to be very specific with it.
Maybe that actually sounds like a reason it's bad. Ty, any thoughts why it's good?
Because the net can reasonably predict that they would read something kind of like it.
Okay, so it's somewhat predictable. So really the reasons why I said this is good are just reasons that its alternative is bad. If we limit ourselves to a particular definition that the neg proposes, then maybe next time you're going to read an AF that meets that definition. What's the neg team going to do? They have two options. They can either not read T against you, or they can read another slightly more limiting definition that excludes your AF. Then maybe you adapt, then they do it again. This is called the race to the bottom, which is that if we don't allow reasonably topical AFs and we keep these strict limits, then the limits are just going to keep shrinking as AF debaters attempt to meet them. Because neg debaters always want to be able to go for T because T is just so valuable strategically to them. It also prevents shifting goalposts, which is a very similar idea, which is that if you meet the particular limits that the neg proposes in one round or under one definition, they might just read another definition that has limits that are over here instead of over here. So it's not necessarily a race to the bottom, but they'll just pick a definition that you don't meet, and they'll have multiple that are like a little bit different. So this is called shifting goalposts. The moment that you meet their definition, then they're going to pick a different one that meets something else. A race to the bottom is a form of shifting goalposts. It's not quite the same, but so squares and rectangles. Why is this bad? I'm going to get at what Dan just said. This means that AF debaters don't have to be super specifically topical. They can just be good enough. What does it mean to be good enough?
You can't really say.
You can't really say. So who has to end up deciding whether they're good enough?
Judge?
The judge. So this necessitates judge intervention is a phrase that you'll hear a lot. So if we're arguing that an AF is reasonably topical, it's really hard to have a substantive debate about whether they are reasonably topical. So you end up in this situation where the judge at the end of the round is forced to decide whether they are reasonably topical and whether their defense is sufficient, even if the defense doesn't quite meet the extent of the neg's offense. It's also less objective. Like it's much like between judges, you'll see more and more, much more variability in their decisions on reasonability than on competing interps. So competing interps is an answer to reasonability. It's the alternative paradigm of evaluating topicality. So reasonability and competing interps are just two different ways to think about topicality. This is that topicality should be evaluated on an offense-defense paradigm. That means you are picking the better interpretation, then you vote neg if the app doesn't meet it. So this would say that reasonability is a slippery slope. If we allow topical-ish apps to become like widely agreed on as topical, then new apps are now topical-ish. New apps are reasonably topical, that expands our limits, and then the cycle repeats. This is a slippery slope where we end up with wildly untopical apps maybe at the beginning of this cycle now being perfectly acceptable. So in order to fix this problem, neg debaters will say, you're going to prefer competing interpretations. You should pick whichever interpretation is the best model for debate. So which one produces the best debates, has the best impacts, and avoids the worst ones. And then you should vote based on whether the app meets it. So which side do you think is going to be reading which of these?
F would be reading reasonability.
Yes.
And neg would be reading that.
Yeah. So app is going to read reasonability because, again, it makes judges a little more lenient on topicality. It raises the bar for us to vote on topicality. Something else I'm going to add about a reason why reasonability might be good is that topicality debates aren't always particularly educational. Sometimes they get very esoteric and very boring. So reasonability prevents us from wrapping ourselves up in these boring topicality debates because they're just going to, the bar has to be so much higher before negs start going for T. A note on strategy. T can help other arguments. It's a great basis for counterplan competition. If you read that T enact or strengthen has to go through some actor, then that means that you have the great ground for saying, and I'm going to read a counterplan with a different actor. If they're skirting links to like a disad or a critique maybe that you're used to going for, having topicality there in the background, especially if they're abusively skirting links by using the violation that they've made, then this really supercharges your T-shell. And it can be a fallback if you're not in a debate in a round that you're really ready to debate against. 2AC time allocation. You should be thinking about whether your AF is topical and how good of a topicality debater you are before deciding how long of a 2AC block you're going to read to T. So maybe if you're not worried about this T-shell, you don't think you violate it, and you are confident in your T debating, then maybe you're just going to spend 30, 45 seconds on T. But if maybe you're really worried, maybe you're spending a minute and a half on T. All right. I am now going to stop this presentation because it's over, and I'm going to share my screen again. And I'm going to look, let's look at, see if this is good.
Did you win this round?
I did.
That's good.
Oh, I wanted a 2AR, didn't I? Actually, let's take a look at this. So we were reading our targeted basic income. Last year, the topic was fiscal redistribution with basic income, federal jobs guarantee, and Social Security. You debated on it, didn't you? Yeah. So basic income in middle school, I think they might have reworded the topic to say universal basic income, and I think they dropped Social Security off of it.
Well, there was a Social Security Act that I remember.
I think it was allowed at state. I don't know. Or maybe somebody just misread it in a round I was judging. But anyway, so there was this AF, which was the targeted basic income, and somebody read T universal. Now, universal is not a term in the resolution. So this is really T basic income. They said that basic income refers to a universal basic income, and they read a definition of that. Let me take a look. Meadows. Meadows. Okay, let's take a look at this. Ah, dang it. Don't have their 1NC. Okay, so they read T, basic income means universal basic income. And we read, first we meet, this is a BS we meet. This is obviously wrong. Obviously, we're not a universal basic income since we're only giving it to people who are below the self-sufficiency standard, which is our alternative to the poverty line. So we're not giving it to everyone, but we throw out this me wheat. We meet anyway because why not? It's a time skew. Then we read this counterinterp that says a guaranteed basic income is a form of basic income. It is for just targeted communities with inconsistent or little income. So this is a counterinterpretation. It includes our AF. Then we read limits. Henry wrote this limit articulation, so hence the spelling errors. So we're saying here, what argument are we making here? That the next definition is over or under limiting?
Under.
Under limiting? That they allow for too many apps?
Sorry, no, over.
Yeah. So the app will almost always be saying that the neg is over limiting. So they're saying their app leads to literally one app in the entire area of basic income, which gets rid of like a third of the topic. There's discussions of poverty and reparations that we should be able to have. And if then we make a little framers intent argument here, if they wanted UBI, they would say UBI. Grounds. They still get the CAP critique, the econ disad, 50 state, advantage counterplans, politics disads. We're saying they're not losing any ground because they don't cut a disad about when Jeff Bezos receives the basic income. Here's a little predictability real world argument. In the real world, welfare isn't dispersed universally, so it functions like our AF does. That's a lit checks argument that there's plenty of research out there. 4 is this is kind of a straddles the line between standards and reasonability. It's saying error AF. There are 3 AFs and we defend a huge policy that's highly debatable. The neg doesn't need any help. 5, we say good is good enough. Competing interpretations causes a race to the margins and destroys topic education. Another thing I like to go to add on this is that T substantial checks. So if they had instead said, you have to spend $400 billion, we meet that. And that's a better check on small apps. That's almost a functional limits argument that other arguments check it, except that in this case, it's not functional because it's just T. So this is our little reasonability stuff. Competing interps causes a race to the margins and destroys topic education. All right. The 1AR, they ended up going for topicality in this round. So they say that substantial is vague. This was an answer to the T substantial checks argument that I think I just put on my flow, which is why it wasn't in the doc there. They say substantial isn't vague, is vague. We say, no, it isn't. You can prove in-round abuse and you can read a definition. We extend the we meet because then they have to answer it again. We extend the counterinterp. It says there's 2 kinds. This distinction allows for more topic education. So you might be noticing that a lot of standards just show up repeatedly here. They say that we explode limits when they say that there could be infinite conditions that we subject things to. And then we say no T substantial checks. There also could be a functional limits argument here that nobody's arguing for basic income for persons between the ages of 29 and 33 in Salt Lake County, because there's no evidence to support that. Nobody's writing in the real world about why that's good. So that's an answer there. Limits. Our interp is still checked by other T-shells. So fiscal redistribution. That's a way to ensure that limits stay real. There's not a ton of areas and they don't give examples. This is why you got to give case lists. If you don't give examples of how they explode limits, you're not doing well. So only value in-round abuse. This again is like our reasonability argument, but they say there's potential abuse. Well, we didn't do any of it. So prefer reasonability. It's a core F. This right here is a predictability argument. lots of camp cards. This is a grounds argument. So I hope you're seeing there's a lot of different standards arguments that go on when you're doing T debating. This probably could have been organized better and more separate. So again, this is just a defense argument. It's predictable. It's disclosed. It's a camp AF. Grounds, they read it off and they all linked. Means testing gives more ground because they can attack on stigma. They can say that means testing is a uniquely bad way to do this. So this is a link turn to the grounds argument, which is kind of like how you debate a dissad. You link turn it.
There were 8 different.
Oh, they read Adolf. Yeah.
Wow. What did they read?
In this round, they have read politics, set call, T universal, T increase. I guess I can just look at the 2AC. The Constitutional Convention counterplan, and I think that's it. 1, 2, 3. And the Executive Authority counterplan. 4, 5, 6. Okay, so they read 6 off. Apparently I typed that wrong. Anyway, so then there's this lit checks. Literally all US empirics are about targeted basic incomes because there is no UBI program. That's all we've studied. Then they say, this was weird. They read a different T-shell saying you have to increase an existing program. If you combine that with the basic income has to be universal and you have to increase an existing basic income, there is no existing universal basic income. That's a limits argument that there would be literally none. This was something mean that I think Henry wrote, which is the links are just lazy, but they also read specific links, so they don't lose grounds. All right, here's a good stuff. Over limiting. The definition is bad. It crowds out reparations, discussions of structural violence, and a bunch of interesting AFs. That's an education argument. This crowd out thing, we should be able to talk about this. This is education that's valuable. Even if you buy that their interp is a better definition, this is a bit of a weird, I would not say this now. Reasonability and T substantial checks all their offense. There's no lost ground, infinite unpredictable Fs. You should hold it to the standard of in-round of use, and RF is ridiculously predictable. You know what I want? I want to look at, where did I go for it? Oh, this is a politics round, dang it. Well, anyway, so where did I? Sorry.
You're good.
I don't know where I went. No, I want Meadows. Okay. So, and then the 2AR is going to kind of boil this down. This was a really messy 2AR. It was our first key round in the year.
Oh, wow.
But we extend the we meet. I don't even know why we extended that. That was a bad decision. We extend the counter interp. We give a bunch of reasons why they're under limiting. We do some voter debate. We do a little bit of reasonability, in-round abuse, education. Okay. And then grounds. And then this was honestly copy and pasted from the 1AR. All right. I'm going to find a better round on T. I want to find me going for T substantial.
11 rounds. Wow.
Never mind. Why did I pick a neg round? What the heck?
I'm not sure. That's what I was wondering.
Okay. This will do. So this AF was, we argued, a very small increase in fiscal redistribution. It was an expansion of disability insurance through Social Security. We read an interp. Substantial means more than 2%. We continue with this interp because we have to figure out what 2% is. It's at least $40 billion. We then say the disability expansion costs 300 million, which is a 0.015% increase. And then 100 million of that is bureaucratic costs. That's only 200 million. It's actually redistribution, which is not 40 billion. Then we read another violation. So T is oftentimes more complicated than just interp, violation, standards, voters. It gets a little more. We say that it would reduce disability expenditures on net because we would give partial benefits if we did. This was from their own. This was a re-highlight, which is a useful trick sometimes. It's a hidden F spec shell in here, but I didn't go for it and I didn't read it. The violation, it's a lot less than 2%. Limits, they explode limits. They include ticky-tacky changes that spike links, which is a grounds argument, the links thing. Core topic DICSADs rely on substantial increases. It's impossible to find literature about tiny changes, and they can score all sorts of links. It's a voter for education and fairness. All right.
Did you win this round?
We did.
Did you win off of T?
Yes, and I wrote almost the entire T1 and R, so I can't point any of this on Henry. So this is a little overview. Some grammar stuff. They said that substantial means of considerable value in our evidence, which is just a misread, so we clarified that. Here's a bunch of interp evidence, which I read to prove that it's predictable, because if a bunch of people have decided that 2% is the standard for substantial, then it's probably more predictable than if just one. Then here's just a rearticulation of that violation. It only has 200 million in actual benefit payouts. It's a voting issue. It explodes limits. They explode the case list, and we read a case list. You can read a basic income to cat owners in Des Moines. I don't know where that came from.
Was that where National was?
Yes, actually, but they can read a job guarantee for policy debaters. Insert their word here was, I was just going to be like considerable whatever. So essentially I'm arguing here that they don't limit affirmatives based on size at all. They can read tiny affirmatives, which makes the next research burden huge. Grounds, it's impossible to cut links to the econ DICSAD that are based on spending, links to politics that are based on disagreements about spending, links to spending DICSADs where they only spend a tiny amount of money. So that's a grounds argument that we're losing all sorts of ability to debate. This was a grammar clarification. This is called proving in-round abuse. They, in the 2AC, attempted to answer a politics DICSAD by saying that there's no link because the plan is minuscule. Or no, this was the inflation DICSAD. They said the plan is minuscule. So they literally skirt the link by being so small that, and they articulate this. This was like, oh, I decided we were going for T the moment they said that. I was so happy. Anyway, they said the plan is minuscule. This proves what kind of abuse? Is this potential abuse? It's in-round abuse. So, because they actually spiked our link by not being substantial. They used that to their advantage. Then they said that the link is overblown because their AF is small. Then they said that because the AF's effect is substantial, then it's substantial. What's that called? I said a key word in there.
Don't know.
Affects topicality. If it's only substantial because it has a substantial effect, but it doesn't do a substantial policy change, then it's not substantial. Then it's a little argument. This is more on the counterinterp debate. They say substantial means considerable, and we say that qualitative definitions are amorphous and have multiple different interpretations, which means you should prefer our quantitative interpretation. It's the only way to prevent race to the bottom. So I actually kind of flipped around the reasonability rhetoric here, which is that if we allow substantial or considerable, then we get this cascading slippery slope of what we think is considerable. Even still, this is an answer to the reasonability argument. Reasonability says gut check the AF. If you buy it, vote AF. Gut check 0.01% is not considerable. It doesn't even meet its own interp. So yeah, here's the reasonability answers. It's a race to the bottom. If this isn't already the bottom, their model of debate results in the tiniest changes being considered substantial, which is terrible for fairness in education. So this is just an answer to reasonability. It causes us to the slippery slope of ever more marginal affirmatives. Then they're not reasonable. They're a decrease in fiscal redistribution. That was the link turn earlier. But even if you don't buy that, it's 0.1%, 0.01% of fiscal redistribution. That's not debatable. It's not reasonable. And then this is a joke. I said that if you say 0.01% is substantial and 2%, we should make a reasonable compromise and say 1%. I thought that was funny, but this wasn't an actual argument. But I did get Parker Hopkins to laugh at it. He's a most state debater. Anyway, this is an answer to plain text in a vacuum. Plain text in a vacuum means that any AF is topical if it says fiscal redistribution. This means that this plain text, the United States should substantially increase fiscal redistribution by cooperating with NATO on emerging tech, is a topical plain text. Because it does. That's like what plain text in a vacuum results in, which is absurd. Like, that's stupid. It means any AF that includes specific words is topical. So plain text in a vacuum is a bad argument. They went for plain text in a vacuum in this round. The counterinterp, I re-highlighted it. It says more than a little. And then I said that they're not more than a little. This is a limits argument. I said, no, we don't actually limit that out. They said that AF ground outweighs because neg has good generics. And we said, no, because topic generics aren't that good and there's only 2 of them. Plus, you should be prepared to be generic. You're always going to be better on the generics debate than the neg debater who hasn't been able to prep, even if you're reading a topical AF. The AF has infinite prep to win this generic setup debate, so neg ground is what outweighs. Neg should have good, strong arguments. They say functional limits check. They say that small AFs don't have solvency advocates. And then I link turn this. I say that amplifies the ground argument. Solvency advocates are a great way to find counterplane ground. A solvency advocate that says this is a problem, we should solve it in one of like 5 different ways, maybe. Those 4 other ways that aren't the AF are counterplans. And it also proves that lit doesn't check, which means it's not debatable because we can't research to answer it. This was a fire 1 in R. I'm so proud of this one, actually.
Wait,
and then I said, I'm 1 and 2A. Cool. But I'm a T hack, so solvency advocates are good. That's how we learn how policy works. They say there's finite advantage grounds. Substantial AFs, we said, they say that we limit out advantage grounds. We said no. Substantial AFs can still be soft left. Like, they could still target the disability income, have a disability advantage on a basic income AF. Then they say generic dissads. There's literally only generic dissads on this topic. So we would say that under their interpretation, we have to phone it in with generics every time because they have so many AFs that we have bad debates. Honestly, this was just to skew them even further on time. We went for, I put it in T increase, which is that they decrease fiscal redistribution, which they concede. Increase means to make bigger. Yeah. Then I said on net it decreases. Even if you don't buy it, you can still subtract it, which makes kind of how T arguments interact with each other and with other arguments. Kind of like how when they read T increase and T universal, they limited out to 0 affirmatives. Like, yeah. This is something Henry wrote, the plan text and vacuum stuff, but
Oh.
that we didn't generate offense.
What did the
Okay.
2NR look like?
You're about to see.
Yeah, so I was just wondering if we could go through some of me and Ty's RFPs or case.
Oh yeah, we're about to. I'm gonna finish up in just a second. I just want y'all to see what T debating actually looks like past the 1 and C. And a lot of it is you got to be keeping rigorous flows. All right. On the interp, you got to extend your interp at the top. You got to extend your violation at the top. You got to be clear about what you're going for.
Did you copy and paste a lot of this from the 1NR?
Some of it, yeah.
Okay.
Like some of this just overview stuff.
Okay.
This right here, again, they called the F minuscule to avoid the inflation disad link. Then here's another limits argument. All right, plan text in a vacuum. They went for it and made a bunch of arguments in the 1AR. So the 2NR answers a bunch of plan text in a vacuum stuff. They say that pix check, any part of the plan is topical, so we can't pick out of any of it. If we're not topical. This it's really hard to explain these without the context. So, but what I do want you to notice is this is all 5 of the points that they raised on plan text in a vacuum. If you drop any of them, you're kind of in trouble. So you have to be flowing and you have to be able to catch all of these and then write an answer. Hopefully they'll put analytics in the doc. Again, every plan is topical, so that's just reiterating the stuff there. I went for 2 T-shells, I guess. This is so wild. They concede reasonability and the interp, so that means just like a final. If they concede reasonability and they concede the interp and they just go for a plan text in a vacuum, then that means that if you don't think that plan text in a vacuum resolves all of the negatives impacts, you're voting neg. All right. T increase, kind of same thing, except I obviously didn't write this out as well because I was just like, if I have time, I'll T increase them and then make the 2AR struggle, which the 2AR did. Anyway. So yeah. All right. Any questions? No question?
Nope.
Alrighty then. I'm going to stop this recording and we'll go over y'all's RSVs.